Welcome to the Aging Well podcast. I'm Jeff Armstrong here with Corbin Bruton. In this and the episodes that follow, we will share candid discussions on aging and hear from the experts. We are here to inform and encourage as we experience, aging. Okay, so I'm on my own today, so I thought I'd give a little discussion about aging well in the post-pandemic. Here in Oregon, this is our first day after the mask mandates have lifted. So we are starting to hopefully get to what some might consider a bit more normalcy. Today I want to talk a little bit about what we can do to make ourselves less hospitable to viral infection, including the coronavirus. Talked about this probably a few times here and there, the little bits and pieces that we have talked about in the podcast over the last couple of months. And I just want to make a little bit more focus on considering now that we have kind of lifted some of these restrictions, and we want to make sure that we are keeping ourselves safe and being prepared for any other future infections that might come along, because the coronavirus is going to be here. It's going to rear its ugly head again. Who knows, sooner rather than later, and we need to be ready. And there's many things that we have not done over the last 2 years that we really need to be putting to the forefront now that we are lowering some of the restrictions. And the first thing I think that we need to promote, that we must promote, is that we should be achieving and maintaining a healthy body composition. And what is a healthy body composition? I'm not talking about getting down to a point where we can see our six-pack abs and all that kind of things. That's not healthy. In fact, it's much less healthy than carrying a little bit of body fat. What I'm talking about is kind of turning the tide on this increasing susceptibility to obesity in our country. We have seen obesity rates rise dramatically over the last 2 years, and presently we are probably approaching about 40% of the U.S. population being obese, and that is not healthy. It's costing billions of dollars in healthcare costs, and from a coronavirus standpoint, it dramatically increases the risk of infection and severe infection and hospitalization and possibly even death. And it is a central factor in many, if not all, of the health conditions that are considered to be comorbidities or things that are increasing the risk of severe infection with coronavirus. And so a healthy body composition is just getting down into that healthy range of body fat relative to the amount of lean muscle tissue. And it's not just about losing fat. I think that could be a very bad approach to just focus on losing weight, losing fat, and not focusing on the importance of increasing and maintaining our muscle mass, particularly as we age, because it's that increase in muscle mass that allows us to do more, which is going to make us more active, would make us more fit and more protected against viruses and viral infection. So I would encourage people to not only focus on cutting the calories and trying to get into a hypocaloric state where we are expending more calories than we are intaking, but also to increase the muscle mass so that we can actually eat more and be healthier, so that we're getting more nutrients because we're not restricting ourselves excessively in terms of the calories that we intake. I would also suggest that we increase our physical activity in order to improve our body composition. So I would say walking more, getting out, moving more, hiking more, being more active in many, many ways is going to benefit our health. And that's another statistic that has come out over the last couple of years, is that right now only about 23% of the U.S. population is meeting the minimum physical activity guidelines that are set forth by the American College of Sports Medicine and the American Heart Association. That's the minimal guidelines, which means 77% of the U.S. population is barely moving at all. And we wonder why we're getting sick. Well, we're not healthy. We're not active. And of that 23%, I would venture to say that the majority of those are still not even exercising to a level that it's going to improve their health and improve their longevity. So we need to increase exercise as well. And what kind of exercise? I think obviously, some level of cardiovascular exercise, but I wouldn't put all my eggs in that basket, particularly for losing body weight, because as we exercise only doing cardio, we tend to lose fat and in the process probably also lose some muscle mass. And so it becomes this vicious cycle. We lose body fat, lose muscle mass. We gain back some of that fat, but we don't gain back the muscle mass. We go on a diet again, we lose that fat. We're doing excessive amounts of cardio. We lose more muscle. And over time, we become much less muscled. We refer to that as sarcopenia, the loss of muscle mass, which comes with aging. There is a certain level of that is attributable to the aging process. But overall, that loss of muscle mass that we see as one ages is typically linked more to inactivity as opposed to being linked to some genetic coding or some changes that happen to us as we age or as a process of aging. And so I would encourage more strengthening type of exercises, more hypertrophy type of exercise that is going to help to maintain muscle mass and thereby improve our body composition. How much fat? Again, I would say that the healthy range for most males is going to be just short of 20%, ideally pushing closer to about 12% body fat. And for females, probably somewhere between about 20 and 25% body fat. It doesn't have to be something that we are doing for aesthetic purposes. And certainly we should not be judging one on their body composition based on appearances. We shouldn't be judging anyone, period. But the judgment should not be based on appearances. It should be based on our health. We should be looking at ourselves and saying, I'm not healthy. I need to lose fat in order to get myself more healthy and to improve my ability to be more active and to age better. We also need to improve the diet. The diet in this country has progressively gotten worse and worse with, more and more fast food restaurants popping up. Our lifestyles are such that we're rushing from here to there. And so it's on the go. Let's grab food quickly. And that food that we are grabbing quickly is generally very highly processed and full of unhealthy fats, unhealthy sugars and salts and other chemicals and things that are there to preserve the food, to make it taste better, to make us want to buy more of it. And we need to shift away from that. We need to start eating more whole, healthy foods. Doesn't have to be organic. It doesn't have to be, really elaborate, fancy foods. It doesn't even have to be expensive foods. We just need to make better choices within our current budgets and work toward, top priority in a healthy diet is meeting that caloric balance, being to a point where we are not progressively gaining weight over time because we're eating more than we are expending. We need to be somewhere between a eucaloric state where we are maintaining our body weight and ideally shifting some of that body weight toward more muscle and less fat. Or we need to be, in some situations, more hypocaloric where we are consuming fewer calories so that we can lose weight. But we got to keep those calories high enough that we're getting adequate nutrition. And so that nutrition needs to be coming from good, whole, healthy foods. We know that the immune system does better on a better diet. We know that the immune system is going to be stronger when we are eating good, healthy foods and eating adequate calories. We also know that things like vitamin D, zinc, vitamin C, and other vitamin supplements are very beneficial to boosting the immune system and helping us to fight off many of the viruses that we might be exposed to. We also need quality fats in our diet because that's where our hormones are coming from, and many other cell structures rely heavily on the fats that we bring into our body. But those fats need to be healthy fats. We need to be focusing on things like eating nuts, eating avocado, eating olive oil, coconut oil, the oils that are much more healthier for us. And we need to be eating much, much less refined sugar and refined foods. The more that we can shift away from that, the healthier we're ultimately going to be. We also have to be much smarter among the most vulnerable. If you are at a risk of COVID or any kind of infection, which that risk increases as we look at aging. If you're over 65, your risk of getting sick is much higher. And that risk comes from what is referred to as immunosenescence. And I'll post some links to some studies that are worth the read. One of them is from Franceschi and others. It was published in 20,000. It's titled Inflammaging: An Evolutionary Perspective on Immunosenescence. They kind of coined the phrase inflammaging, and which talks about how our risk of getting sick, of having a more dampened immune response, increases as we age. Another study was done by Michael Flynn and others. It is titled Elevated Inflammatory Status and Increased Risk of Chronic Disease in Chronological Aging, Inflammaging or Inflam Inactivity. So Flynn and others actually coined this term inflam inactivity to kind of support that it's less that we are aging, but more that we are becoming increasingly inactive that is causing our immune system to be diminished. And so if we are among those more vulnerable, we are an aging population. As we are getting older, we need to be doing more activity in order to maintain our immune system. Now, certainly there is some loss of immune function as we age. That comes from the thymus involuting, as they refer to it, where it gets smaller, it atrophies with age, and so it has less capacity to mature and to develop new T cells, and so we lose some immune function as we age. But also, much of it is because we are becoming less and less active as we are aging, and so we want to improve on that, being more active, trying to counter the things that make us more vulnerable. There are others who have various immune system disorders that they simply cannot do anything to improve their immune system per se. And so in those cases, certainly vaccination is important. So the older we get and the more vulnerable we are to infection, certainly we need to consider vaccination and protecting ourselves in that way. Well, of course, with the present vaccination, there's a lot of concerns as to whether or not that the present vaccine is going to continue to be effective. I mean, we're basically working off of a vaccine that is based off of an old form of the virus, and we have a very new form or strain of the virus that's circulating. And so we have to be a little bit more careful as that immunity wanes, and as we perhaps wait for more updated vaccinations to occur. And if that's the case, then those who are vulnerable need to do a little bit more in high-risk situations, such as maintaining their masks when they are in those high-risk situations, where they're in large crowds or where they're around people who could potentially be sick and carrying the virus. But there are other things that we can be doing as well. We need to be sleeping better. We should be getting a good 6 to 8 hours of sleep per night. Not oversleeping, but getting enough quality sleep to allow the body to recover, to allow the body's immune defenses to be acting on viruses that might be circulating in our bodies. We need to manage stress. We need to focus on trying to do the things that are going to limit our stressful situations, but also be able to deal with stress more effectively, because stress is going to be there. There is no way to avoid stress 100%. We have to be able to look at stress as something that we can stand up to, that we can endure, that we can manage well, and not add stress to our stress by being stressed. We need to focus on well-centered fitness. That's one of the key themes that I like to promote, is that we need to be balanced spiritually, physically, intellectually, emotionally, and socially. And that balance helps us not only to be healthy in a more general sense and to be healthy in a biopsychosocial standpoint, but to be healthy from an immunological standpoint as well. When we are doing the things that benefit us spiritually, that allow us to recognize that we are not the center of the universe, that there is more to the universe than just ourselves, that we are engaging in the activities that one might consider to be spiritual, whether they're religious or just simply of a spiritual nature, where we're talking about meditation and engaging in an understanding that the world is bigger than self. Physically, exercising, eating right, the things that we've been talking about in most of this podcast today. Intellectually, informing ourselves and using our brain and developing our brain, though it may not have the most benefit per se for our immune system, it is certainly helping us as a whole person to be better. And that's going to help us to manage stress. And we're also becoming better informed. And so we can understand better maybe the stress that we are under, or understanding the current virus that we are trying to defend ourselves against. Getting information and getting good information, not just some of the misinformation that's been out there. And there's been misinformation on really both sides of the whole pandemic argument. And it's important that we are informing ourselves and understanding the information that we are receiving. And then there's the emotional piece, doing the things that are going to make us more positive, more happy, more self-assured, more just improving our feelings of well-being are going to be very critical. And then socially, we have been so damaged socially throughout this pandemic because we have been isolated, because we have covered our faces. We have not seen people smile or show emotion to us for so long. It's important that we have that social interaction, but manage to do it in a safe fashion. There are many things that we can still continue to do. I would stop using the phrase social distancing. I think throughout the pandemic, I have hated that phrase, because social distancing is separating ourselves socially, and that has a damaging effect on us in our well-centered fitness, in our psychological, our biopsychosocial health. We're better to say physical distancing. And the evidence was never really there for an absolute of 6 feet or more separation to protect ourselves against this virus. And it's really, it's probably more closer to 3 feet. But we can manage how we interact with people when we may be infected or there's a risk of infection, that we can still separate ourselves enough physically to protect ourselves, but not separate ourselves socially. We don't want a social distance. We need those connections socially in order to be healthy. And so as we're going forward now in this new period where the rules are hopefully going to be starting to shift back to a little bit more normalcy, we don't have to wear masks, but many of us might feel the need to still wear a mask. That's fine. Wear the mask if you need it to be protected, or if you are needing to protect other people who you are interacting with. We got to remember that we are not alone in any of this, and that we need to be focused on our health as well as the health and well-being of others. And so I think it's important that we consider, as we age in this post-pandemic world, if you want to call it that we do still have some level of declining weakness in our immune system, and that we need to focus on being protected against any virus and all viruses, or any other type of pathogenic infection. And so we want to focus on our total health. And to focus on our total health, it's not just focusing on a single viral type. It's focusing on anything that is going to make us healthier and be able to live longer. One of our recent podcasts, we talked about food and longevity. I encourage the listener to listen to that one if they have not listened to it yet. Because as we look at the types of foods that we can eat, eating more legumes, eating less red meat, and eating more vegetables, more fruits, eating a healthier diet is going to improve our overall health and our ability to combat disease. When we're exercising, we are improving not only our capacity to fight off disease, but we're also improving our capacity to do physical work. And the more work we can do, the healthier we're going to be. And the more exercise that we can do and the more physical activity that we can do that will help make us healthier in the long run. Getting sleep, managing our stress, focusing on our well-centered fitness, being spiritual, physical, intellectual, emotionally, and socially balanced, daily journaling, daily reflection, daily meditation. These are all things that we can do post-pandemic to make ourselves healthier and to hopefully be better protected when any additional waves or future waves of any viruses come along. So I will share a list of number of articles in the podcast notes, and I hope that you have benefited from today's podcast and that you will focus on aging well in the post-pandemic. Thank you for listening. I hope you benefited from today's podcast, and until next time, keep aging well. If you have topics you would like to have us discuss on the Aging Well podcast, please click on the links in the episode description to send us a text or record your message or comments. We'd love to hear from you and how we can help you age well. If you benefit from the Aging Well podcast and would like to support the content financially, please click on the Support the Show link or support our affiliates and advertisers.